It's no secret that if you're going to be successful in real estate investing, you have to be able to fund your deals. Whether you're doing the Burr method or whether you're fixing and flipping properties for a profit, you got to be able to get to the closing table with money, and you got to have money to rehab the property. And so I personally use Backflip Capital when I need money to get to the closing table and to rehab my properties. I'm in the middle of a flip right now, and I partner with Backflip. It has been the smoothest process of all time. I literally went on their app, applied for the loan. You get pre-approved in less than 48 hours. You can lock in funding in just a few seconds with the touch of a button. Funding takes less than 2 weeks. Hello, that gives you an advantage when you're making offers on properties. And I can't say enough about partnering with Backflip Capital. They're great folks with a fantastic product that everybody listening to this should check out for the next time you go to do a Burr deal or fix and flip property. So here's what I want you to do. Go down to the show notes of this show. I've put a link for Backflip Capital in those notes. All you have to do is click the link so that you can download their app and get your next deal funded with Backflip. All right, everybody. I'm here with Zeona McIntyre. Zeona, what's up?
Hey, I'm a little disappointed you're not wearing your cowboy hat. I'm like, dang, that's what I was sold in all the Instagram reels.
I know. I get that a lot on these podcasts. What I'm going to have to do is get a custom-made hat because I can't put the headphones over the hat. And so I need to get like a hat that has like, a dent in the middle where I can put the headphones on. But until then, and like I shoot these like a lot at a time, and a cowboy hat for like 6 hours at a time, not the most comfortable thing. So anyways, it is sitting right here if that makes you feel any better.
Yeah, there's another one in your background. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah. We're there. We got them here. I'm just being lazy at the moment. But I am stoked to talk to you today. The listeners are in for a treat because we're going to get to dive in to all things midterm rentals, which I do not claim to be an expert at. I've done a lot of long-term rentals, trailer parks, short-term rentals, but midterms is something I've never dabbled in, but there is a lot of opportunity there, as you know. So I'm excited for you to get to dig in and, share, all your secrets, all your tips and tricks with everybody. So tell everybody a little bit about yourself. I know you're in Colorado. How'd you get to where you are today?
It's been a long journey. I've been doing this since 2012. So I think a lot of people didn't even realize that Airbnb's been around that long, but actually it was born in the recession. And so Airbnb started as an airbed. That's what the airbed and breakfast is what it originally was. And so that was back in 2008. So I found it early on. And I started with what they call now arbitrage, but basically I was just renting rooms in my house. And then eventually realized like, oh, I need to expand. If I want to do more of this, I need more spaces. And so I went out and I rented another apartment, and I lived between two apartments for a couple of years, just kind of whatever was rented, I would just leave. And I lived out of a suitcase for a long time. But that was the hustle that it took until I could afford to buy. And then I was financially independent. So I was 28 years old, and that was only 2 years into doing it. And it was only owning one Airbnb property. So, I mean, it's pretty cool how fast it can happen, how easy it can be. And of course, nowadays, there's a lot more competition in the space, but the midterm space is really interesting and it's really young. So you can still be an early adopter too.
That's really cool. Yeah, I feel like everybody's zoned in on Airbnb short-term rentals, but midterm rentals is still building some momentum. I'm sure you probably see more competition than you did when you first started, but I feel like you're still early in the game. A lot of people don't do it as much. And tell me if I'm right. Have some places locked down on regulations with midterm, or am I making that up?
Nah.
They haven't.
No. I mean, the only way that you see issues is sometimes with HOAs.
Yeah.
So in general, an HOA just wants to push out the short-term rentals. So most HOAs just say 30 days plus, which is what's beautiful about the midterm space is that anything 30 days plus is kind of puts you in this gray area that you're kind of a long-term rental, right? So people don't really think about us in that space. But there are some like luxury buildings and stuff where they say 6-month minimum. And that's been in place way before midterm was really a thing. So It's not a new regulation, but you do have to check your HOA docs when you're purchasing something.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, we always, we had to do that. We own a couple short terms in a HOA community, and
Hmm.
always know what you're allowed to do before you go spending a
Yes.
bunch of money to buy a property. Explain to everybody what a midterm rental is. I guess we're just diving right into, to it without explaining. There may be some people saying, "What in God's creation is a midterm rental?"
Hey, what are we even talking about?
Yeah.
So a short-term rental is anything under 30 days and it's furnished, and that's usually a vacation stay, and that normal term is like 3 or 4 nights. Then a midterm rental is anything over 30 days. And our normal stay is about 3 months. And that's because a lot of the tenants that come into that space are traveling medical professionals, and they usually have 3 month terms and then often extend for 6. So what's cool about that is that you maybe only need 4 tenants a year rather than a short-term rental where you need like 100. You know, it's
Yeah,
it's just a lot less turnover, which brings more ease. And then of course there's long-term rentals that are unfurnished generally, and they're a year.
that's interesting. Would you say that y'all's niche, like you really hone in on trying to hit those travel nurses, those medical professionals who are coming in? Is that what your target market?
It really depends where you own. So I own in a bunch of different states, but where I live, Boulder, Colorado, I have 2 condos near a hospital, and I very rarely get nurses. We just don't have a lot of travel nurses coming in. I have had them, but this is more of a tech place, and so I get a lot of like traveling scientists and Google people, digital nomads that just want to come hang in Boulder. So that it's kind of different depending where you are.
That's really cool. Um, yeah, that's pretty neat. Where do you like buy, class wise, like when you're looking to buy these particular properties? So I know I buy a lot of long-term rentals, and so for me, I'm probably looking in different areas than you are for midterm rentals. So
Mhm.
I'm looking in, C class neighborhoods, distressed properties that I can add a little value to, maybe, force appreciate them, then get them rented out. And then I know when I look at Airbnbs, I'm looking more in typically a class area, or maybe a B plus area. So what have you found, as a sweet spot? I know you guys got what, 7 rentals that you rent out as midterm rentals. So you probably got a couple different locations that you do it. But what's been that sweet spot for y'all?
Yeah, so I'd say there's really two distinct strategies if you're doing a midterm. And a lot of times people focus on the nurses, but actually the nurses are your cheapest tenants. They really just want to make as much money as they can, and so they want a really cheap accommodation. And that still works for some people depending where you are on, how much money you can make versus how much it costs to buy that place. Or if you've owned something a long time, you might be just happy with nurses. But if you're really looking for upside, the upside comes from clients that are using insurance companies to pay for their stays. And those are people that might have had a pipe burst, water loss, fire, flood in their area, anything like that. And it's actually really common. And when the insurance company is paying, it's more of a business to business situation rather than working directly with a person. So they have a lot more money to give for a situation like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so the market that you buy is going to be different. So if you're doing something that's more for a nurse, you can be a smaller unit, like 1 to 2 bedroom. It can be a condo. They like to be closer into things. So A, B, those are great. As far as neighborhoods, because you want to be kind of like in a hip, cool area or close to the hospital, which is just like convenience factor. If you're doing insurance, you actually want to try to be A if you can, but maybe B plus or something like that. Because what's more important there is you want to be a little more suburbs, but you want to be by the good schools where it's going to be a lot of families. So you're looking for a bigger home in those situations. So often 4 bedrooms or more.
That's really cool. We actually just had one of my friends lives in it was a apartment complex, but I think like 4 units just burned down. It was
Yeah,
crazy. And they had to rehome, those 4
that's
people
sad.
until they can get that place rebuilt. And things like that happen, unfortunately,
Mhm.
fires, floods, damage from storms. And I never really thought about that in the midterm market to be able to have those places and then have an insurance money pay you. That's almost like, having a Section 8 rental. Not really. It's different. Government's paying you Section 8, but you got,
Yeah.
some pretty reliable income coming in.
Yeah, I was talking to a person yesterday about a potential insurance claim to be in our house, and our house, I think our all-in expenses are somewhere around 3,500. So that's like our mortgage and our utilities and lawn care, everything, because you cover all of that. And what I was negotiating with her was $9,000 a month. So just kind of have an idea there of the spread of what you can make cash flow wise. And I think it's important not to just go, "Ooh, great, I'm going to have all this money." But it's like, how can I reinvest in the home? How can I take that windfall and maybe, put up a nice fence or like improve the landscaping or do some great things to the home that really will attract more and more guests.
That's really cool. I love that. So when it goes to marketing midterm rentals and knowing what to charge, where do you start? Because long-term rentals, you can do it through a property manager. You can put it on Zillow, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Obviously, short-term rentals definitely going on Airbnb. What does that
Yeah.
look like on the midterm space?
Yeah, so I usually try to tell people just start with a couple so you don't get overwhelmed. I mean, if you're coming from the short-term rental space, then you're kind of used to being on a few websites, so that might be easier for you. The top ones I say are Furnished Finder, which is traveling medical professionals primarily, but it's just gotten more popular. So I see a lot of like relocations on there, students, different stuff. And that's sort of your cheapest option, right? So that's where a lot of people are going for a deal. Then Airbnb still is great for 30 days or more. Airbnb put out some data that 28% of their bookings are 30 days or more. So they're actually getting a lot of traction in that space. And then Zillow, like you mentioned, is actually a really great space for furnished rentals. But if
Oh,
someone's wanting to get into the insurance space, I'm probably on like 8 websites, so they can definitely reach out if they want to get nitty gritty about it. Some of them are just placement companies where you basically give them your information, but you don't have like a back end where you can tinker on your listing. So you get listed and they call you if they're looking in your area. So it's kind of a one and done thing. It's not too complicated.
yeah. So you're not having to cold call and reach out to these insurance companies. You're placing yourself in their databases, and
Yeah.
then when they need you, they're reaching out to you.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I mean, there are people that cold call and you could build relationships and try, but we did a little bit of that and found it to be, I feel like a time suck. So I
Yeah.
like the, easy path. And so we've listed and people come through that. So we've been full and happy with that. But you did ask about how to know how to price. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that's good is that the websites that you have comparisons on use those comparisons. So on Airbnb, you can see what other people are charging. You can look at AirDNA. On Furnish Finder, you can do the same. You can search your town and even use their map and see what is being charged in different areas. And all of that is just a negotiation place. So you can put out your price and you can change it seasonally. Please change it seasonally because this is a seasonal business. But a lot of the places if you do get like an insurance company that calls you, even from a Zillow or a Furnish Finder, you can say, hey, that's my starting price. And we have to take into account that this booking might go over July, which is our highest month. So, do a little math in your head and shoot out a really high price. So there are ways to kind of get into the nitty gritty about it. I'll tell you one more thing that helps with insurance is that there is coverage D. So anybody who wants to go and like learn a little bit more about what insurance companies will cover, you can go into your claim right now. Just, go online and check it out. Go to your coverage D. That's the loss of use coverage. In there, you'll see what you can have for a year. Sometimes it is 25 to 35% of the home value, which is a lot of money for that year. Ours actually said unlimited, which is I was shocked to see. So there is a lot of money there for somebody if they want to kind of say, "Hey, I want to get 10% of my home value a month or, 25%." It's a lot.
When I set out on my real estate journey 5 years ago, I wasn't exactly sure what the outcome was going to be, but I knew based on history that people who had bought this asset and held it over time, It had completely changed their lives. It had given them life-changing wealth. It had given them time freedom, and it had given them financial freedom. And I knew that I wanted that for myself and my family. Fast forward from 2018 to today, and it has completely changed our lives. It has completely changed my family tree because I said yes. I took that step forward into buying this asset that has proven itself time and time again for centuries. And so if you're still on the sidelines and you have yet to start buying real estate, or maybe you have a few properties, but you've ran into roadblocks and you haven't been able to scale and add the volume you needed to have that huge impact on your life, then I want to invite you into our Rental Academy community, where you're going to be linked up with investors all across the country. You're going to have coaching multiple times a week from myself and our entire panel of world-class coaches. You're going to be given all the knowledge and know-how that you need to be successful in real estate, the calculators, the templates, the guides, the lending partners, the insurance partners, the LLC partners, all of it. We're going to teach you everything you need to know to be successful in real estate investing. And then we're going to be there with you along the journey, hold your hand and guide you so that you can have the opportunity to reach and achieve financial freedom like I and so many of our students and people across the country have. So when you're ready to say yes, text the word WIN, W-I-N, to 871-861-9264. Set up a time to chat with myself or somebody on our team so that we can go on this journey with you and help you achieve the life of your dreams. That is crazy. I feel like this is just a hack. Like, why aren't more people, renting out their properties, in the midterm space? I guess what made you take that route? I can guess that it's probably the returns, when you look at it, because when you look at the returns compared to long-term rentals, it's going to be outrageously higher. And then when you do look at the headaches compared to short-term rentals, it should be ridiculously lower. So my guess is you're like, this is the sweet spot. I mean, is that how you kind of landed there?
Yeah, I really fell into it accidentally. I had definitely had people stay more than a month in all the years that I was doing short-term rentals, but I just never really thought of that as like a thing to focus on. And then when COVID happened, it really kind of pivoted the market. If you had short-term rentals at that time, you probably had, those mass cancellations happen. And then as an investor, I wasn't going to just sit there with empty properties. I had to get creative about how I could fill it, and found people looking for, more space because they're working from home and they've got their kids at home doing school. There's just a lot of different things going on. Medical, kind of like emergency staff coming in. I remember I hosted somebody that was like in the military for a while that was giving relief. So yeah, I just started to see, oh wow, there's actually a lot of longer stays, and I wonder if I could really like focus on that. And so I really fell into it. And it wasn't until after we wrote our book that I learned about the insurance space and how different that was. So, like I said, this is really young and there's a lot of opportunity still. And so, you have to keep an open mind and not be like, oh, I already know everything. I've been doing this 10 years. Like, no,
Yeah.
you're always learning.
Yeah, for sure. And if you guys want to learn more, I would recommend checking out Zeona's book, The 30-Day Stay. I'm personally going to get it as soon as I get off this call to increase my knowledge on midterm rental. So I'm excited about that. When it comes to the management of, midterm rentals, and I'm sure you cover this in your book, so you can give us a high level view. What does that look like? What's the day to day? It's got to be less than, I would imagine, a short term rental once you get somebody in there. But from you already talked about pricing it, but to putting the pictures up and talking about communications and automations and cleaning, decorations. How do you go through that entire process?
Yeah. So, creating a listing is very similar that you would do for short term rental. So, that part is all similar, but it really is so much easier. Like you said, it's just when you're doing a short term rental, people are having to learn your house in this very short period of time. So, you're getting a lot of the same questions over and over again. And it's usually kind of this like 3-day window. And so, just as someone's sort of getting on their feet, they're gone, and then it's the next person asking all the same questions. And so what I love about the midterm space is they're generally, they're there for jobs. So they're more focused on that. And they're just generally, what's the word? They're just easier to work with. Like they're the type that, if there's a battery dead in a smoke detector. They'll go get a battery. It's not going to be this like midnight call. They're just a little more resilient as a tenant. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And sometimes you don't hear from them at all. And it just feels really nice and quiet. So I think when I was making that pivot, I was starting to be burnt out on operations of short-term rentals. I had built up and managed for a bunch of people, and my places were out of state. And so there's just a lot more that happens when you can't just drive over to the property. And I still think it's super valid to buy out of state because you can get something cheaper maybe than where you live
Yeah.
and make more money. But it does add some complications. So having guests that are there longer, it just makes it so much nicer. Just so much less turnover and headaches and things that can go wrong.
Yeah, because you can definitely get some pain in the butt tenants. And I always say, you said
Yeah.
it. So just to reiterate, you want your place to not be memorable, pretty much. I mean, people could argue with me. They're like, no, you want to deck it out. You want to do this and that. You want it to be enjoyable for the people, 100%. But I always say they're there for something else most of the time. They didn't come to just experience my house. So if they leave and we didn't leave an impact on them, negatively, they're not like, oh, this screwed my stay. You're going to have pretty good success. So it's like, how do you put those things in place, right? If you're thinking as an operator, to make sure that, hey, we're not going to cause a problem in whatever they're here to do. Your folks are there to be, nurses or scientists or whatever. Folks in my short-term rentals are there to vacation. Let's just not screw that up, And so if
Yeah.
we really can build our operations and what we're stocking the house with and everything with that in mind, I feel like it puts us in a pretty good, position to do well in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is nice to have a memorable space, but not a negatively memorable space. So
Yeah.
I
Don't
definitely
leave
see
it like,
what you
don't
mean.
be boring. Hey, I don't think I did a great job of explaining that, but hopefully y'all get what I mean. Like, let's not leave a
Yeah,
bad lasting impression,
absolutely. Yeah. You're creating someone's home. It's a lot different than someone's hotel.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Is it pretty similar when it comes to the short term space of, hey, our future bookings are banking on previous reviews, and if so, like, what are you doing? What keys and success have you found and secrets to get those 5-star reviews to keep the bookings rolling in?
Yeah, so reviews are a lot less important for us. If you are still trying to book on Airbnb, which a lot of people do, and that's great, then that space reviews are important. And it can take a while to build because you might have somebody in for 3 months and then maybe they didn't even leave a review, right? So that can take a bit. It's nice if you have some short-term rentals on your profile and then you do have other reviews and they sort of help you out from other listings, but it's not that important. Um, where was I going with that? Sorry,
No, you're good. Keys to
got a little
get 5-star
sidetracked.
reviews. Keys to get 5-star reviews.
Yeah. What I was gonna say is just that there's a lot of websites where you're not doing reviews.
Yeah,
So Furnish Finder, there is a way to review, but people are not really booking on that website. It's more of a lead generation platform. And so a lot of what you're doing with that guest is in email or phone calls. So it just sort of changes the dynamic. And so reviews are not really that important. So I
that's
don't
cool.
think it's something to worry about as much, which is nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a more organic interaction, like one professional to another professional, which is usually uh, usually involves a lot less emotion, from what I've noticed, than dealing with non-professionals, so to speak, or somebody going on their vacation and they work this awful job, maybe have this terrible life, and it's like, I want everything to be perfect, for this week I'm there.
Yeah.
Whereas you're like, hey, you're here for a reason. We're here to help you. You're here for a while. What do you need to make this stay right? And so when it comes to optimizing folks' stay and how you set up your structure, systems, and processes for actually running the place, what does that look like? What are you stocking it with? How do you have your cleaning folks? How do you communicate with these people?
Yeah, so I use three different automation tools. So we still do pricing software, which I think is really important because that helps you track seasonality. And then we use Hospitable. So any kind of auto messaging software is really helpful. And in the book, I have a series of 7 messages that are all, going out at different days and times of the stay. And I like to just get ahead of them asking questions. So we have a lot less guest communication. And so that can work if you're using Hospitable, it can go directly to their email instead of a channel like Airbnb. So if you're booking with them, direct, you can still just send them all those auto messages and they still get all that information. And then the third thing is that we have leases. So it's a little bit different, right? We're doing like one extra step than if you're doing short term rentals. So I use apartments.com for that. They have leases for all 50 states. So you can just pick up your state lease and you can do some edits if you like, but you don't really need to. It lets you sign online, and then you can do the rent collection and deposit all there automated, which is nice because sometimes people move in different times in the month and you don't want to have to remember like what day they need to pay rent and all that.
That's really cool. I love it. I love like the nitty gritty, actionable details of it all, because I feel like that helps the listeners. It helps me. Like, hey, how do they hear like, oh, people automate Airbnbs? Well, how do you actually automate it? Well, you
Mm-hmm.
use these tools. There's tools out there that will do
Yeah.
the majority of what you need done, and so it's just a matter of adding those to your repertoire, learning how to use them, and then implementing them correctly. And it can take a lot off your plate when it comes to managing. Because if you don't operate these correctly, I'm sure midterm is the same way. It can eat you up. It can eat your time up. And so
Yeah.
really learning how to do it correctly on the front end and, getting resources like Zeona's book, 30-Day Stay, helps with that. It just helps reduce a lot of the pain points as you go. You mentioned earlier, I think hopped onto the FIRE movement, correct? The financial
Mm.
independence, retire early. So
Yeah.
was that where did that come from? Why did you cling to it? Because I have too. I was like, dude, I
Yeah.
want to do that. And would you say that's a catalyst for what got you into real estate? Like, was that your goal? Because most people get into whatever asset they like for a reason, right? I got into real estate because I wanted to build wealth and get financially free. And so, where did that come from on your end?
It's funny because sometimes I feel like my life just like is so accidental, but when I look at it now going back, I'm like, wow, I see all these ways that things were happening at the same time. So I found Mr. Money Mustache. I don't know if that was a blog that was kind of a gateway for you, but that was really popular a bunch of years back. And he's still out there writing, but not as often. So if anybody's curious about the fire movement, definitely go back and read his stuff. I find it to be very valuable. But I found him in 2011. So right before I started Airbnb. And his story was that he saved up 600,000 in index funds and decided to retire at 30. And that was giving him between 2,000 and 2,500 a month in dividends. And so at the time that I found him, I was in college, like broke, working minimum wage. I was just like, yeah, I'm in like 50K of debt. Like for me to even save 600 sounds like crazy. Like that was like millions of dollars in my mind. But I just set the intention. I was like, hey, this guy did this. Like, why can't I? And I was 26 and I just thought, like, okay, that's my goal. I have no idea how I'm going to get there by 30. And because of short term rentals, I did it by 28. And it was just that at that same time, a friend told me about Airbnb. And I just thought, well, this is a little side hustle. I'll just try it out. I had no idea that was going to become my life and that I would buy properties. So, things sometimes just present themselves, but I think it's the power of manifestation, of holding a vision in your mind of what you want and not getting in the way of saying, like, oh, well, I could never do that. I have no idea how I'm going to do that. Um, so for me, it feels magical, but it was all there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think having a goal in mind, I talk about this often, working backwards. What do you want to accomplish? Like, what is your goal? And then I
Yeah.
have a little whiteboard over here and it changes, things change, but I'll write down, I go as like deep as what do I want my ideal day to look like?
Yeah.
And if you know what you're trying to accomplish, then you can put a plan in place to actually accomplish that. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to get pulled by all the shiny objects. Oh, let me do a
Mhm.
syndication here. Let me buy Bitcoin here. Let me invest in index funds here. And not to say that over time those won't benefit you, but when the people who seem the most content to me are the ones who decide what they want, they put the blinders on, and they go after it and they don't get distracted. And when you do that and you do actionable steps to get to that goal, you will get to your destination. You really have no other choice but to succeed, and then you achieve it, and you look back and all the treasures were found along the journey, but the
Yeah.
destination is pretty darn good itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we're constantly on the journey, right? Like, I
Yep.
don't know where the destination is yet.
Yeah. No, and I think it's cool. Like
Yeah.
when you started by doing your own homes or
Yeah.
arbitrage. Like you didn't even buy your first properties. Like people are saying,
Yeah.
well, I don't have any money to buy a place. Well, neither did Ziana. It doesn't sound like she was
No.
arbitraging, which you can explain what that is real quick, to be able to generate cash flow that then I would guess, and you can talk about your journey, led to you being able to acquire more, as time went on.
Yeah. So I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment that I was renting, and I had a roommate that was moving out. And a friend had told me about Airbnb, and he was very persistent. So I just thought, I have this room. I had it furnished with my own stuff, and I had sheets and towels. I was like, well, I could try this. If it doesn't work, I'll just go get a roommate. Like, it's not going to change anything for me. And so that started having enough traction. And I've looked back at what I was making back then, and it was like nothing. I mean, I was basically just covering the rent, and that was cool. And I was cleaning it myself and everything. But it was just that freedom of like, oh, wow, I can live for free. I
Mm.
could stop working at my little, hourly job. There was just some freedoms that started to happen. And then I could save that money that I wasn't now spending on rent. And then that allowed me to go rent another apartment over time. But it wasn't like I did anything so fast. I think a lot of times people think, oh, I saw somebody on TikTok and they had 10 doors in 10 months. Like, how could I ever do that? You don't need to. I mean, even just one place a year, give yourself a few years, and that can be a really great portfolio.
I love that. I love it. The key is get started. Hit singles. Big
Yeah.
baseball guy here. You don't have to hit a grand slam every time. I was on a podcast earlier
Mm-hmm.
with a friend of mine, and he's been in the game 15 years. And he was talking about a property that he bought for 600 grand, and now it's worth 1.9 million. That's a grand slam. But he's
That's amazing.
15 years along in his journey.
Yeah.
You don't have to start with that, nor does anybody expect you to start with that, nor should you start with that. That's a good way to
Yeah.
have a disaster, but we can all go rent a place and then sublease it on Airbnb and do it at a couple different places. The next thing you know, you have cash coming in and you're like, oh crap, like what do I want to do now? And it really, really puts you in a place to win. And you talked about things happening quick. It doesn't happen overnight. And I love that you said that. There's such this false sense of reality that everybody's behind, and
Yeah.
that you got to do something, make it happen in a year. I know my journey. When I came out of college, I had close to $100,000 in debt. It took me 5 years of just paying off debt. It wasn't
Yeah.
investing.
And that's quick.
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes
Yeah.
it can take a lot longer, but I was in the trenches for 5 years before I ever bought my first property. Now I'm 5 years into investing, but I had to start somewhere. It did not happen overnight, but the discipline, the goal, put the blinders on and took actionable steps. And next thing you know, it's like you, Ziana, you look back, you're like, how did all this happen? Like what compounded over time to put me where I am now.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
a
And another way people can start, because arbitrage is risky, renting a property just to do short term rental. Like, I was already living in the property, so I didn't go out and get it for that reason. I didn't go out and furnish it. Um, but people can manage properties. So co-hosting or managing for someone else is no dollars in. I think people forget that. But you're basically just taking a percentage off the top for helping them get bookings. And so if they don't make enough, you're still made something. If they, need sheets and towels, you don't have to provide that. They come with the house, the mortgage, the HOA payment, and all the furnishings. So there are ways that you can get in for no money and
mm,
just get experience.
yeah, I love that co-hosting. And then, I mean, you essentially house hacked renting. You weren't even
Mm-hmm.
you were arbitraging, but in your own property. So it's like you were already expecting to pay the rent there. And a lot of people do the house hack through a traditional long-term rental. They'll put in long-term tenants, but you were like, no, heck no,
Yeah.
I can get a better cash flow, like more money's going to come in. So you're right. There are so many different ways to be able to crush it in this game without a lot of capital, because I know that holds people back on the front end. But if you get creative, you can make some waves and really change your life in the long run. And you can do like Zeona, who they now have 12 doors. She started with her 2 apartments that she's renting. Now they have 12 doors, 7 midterm rentals and 5 long-term. And, they've accomplished their goal. She's free. She can do what she wants, set her own schedule. And, at the end of the day, that is what it's all about. Well, Zeona, this has been amazing. So much information for anybody interested in the midterm rental space. I actually have a long-term rental right now that would be a perfect midterm rental. So I'm going to read your book, 30-Day Stay, and I'm going to give it a shot. As soon as this 10 leases up, and just see. I'll keep you posted too. I'm excited about it. So where can folks find you? Because I know people are going to have questions. They're going to want to get in your network. Where's the best place to get a hold of you?
Yeah, Instagram is a great place. So Zeona McIntyre is my Instagram handle. And then if you want the book, you can get it from Bigger Pockets, biggerpockets.com/30-day stay. And if you use code Zeona, you get 10% off.
Love it. You guys go follow her and get the book ASAP. And if you listen to this, take it and share it with a couple friends. I know that you have somebody in your network who could benefit from Zeona's message. And that'll get the word out about this podcast, be able to share this knowledge with a bunch of people. And then also take a screenshot of you listening to this and tag myself at Finance Cowboy, tag Zeona at Zeona McIntyre in your story on Instagram. Let us know you were listening, and we both personally love to thank you for taking time out of your day. But Zeona, thanks again for being on. I appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon.